Welcome, everybody, to Evolutionary Conversations, conversations to move us collectively forward. My name is Sanjay Bhana. I'm based out in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I'd love to introduce my co-host, Irma, to you. Irma?
Hello, my name is Irma Lukoseviciene, and I'm based here in Vilnius, Lithuania.
Thank you, Irma. These evolutionary conversations are focused on shifting people and organizations into new and alternate ways of thinking, of being, and of doing. Today's conversation focuses on people make or break organizations, personal traits for thriving. What I'd like to start off by doing is telling you a little bit more about our guests. I'm going to start off introduce our first guest, and then I'm going to ask Irma to introduce our second guest. Our first guest today is Meryl Moritz. She's a coach and a director on the International Coaching Federation. She's a dear friend and somebody I've worked closely with for many years, and I trust immensely. Meryl is somebody who is interested in how leaders grow their organization and their capacity to lead exponentially. Her massive transformative purpose is to catapult talent into leadership roles to make the world a better place. If you are a leader who wants to get more insight into your best leadership self and what could be possible in terms of your impact on the globe, then Meryl's the type of person you definitely want to listen to and get in touch with. I'm going to now hand over to Irma to tell you a little bit more about our second guest. Irma?
Thank you, Sanjay. It's an honor to introduce a wonderful man, a suit leader who holds many years of experience in his pocket in the entertainment and fitness industry, an angel investor, a member of several boards, the co-founder and CEO of well-recognized startup MELP, a good friend of mine, and I'm not afraid to say here, the most resilient person I've ever met so far, Vidmantas. I'm going to kick off today's conversation with a story, and please let me share one. A friend of mine, an experienced leader who runs a large corporation, invited me for coffee. As we were cozy sitting and chatting, I asked her how she was doing in her leading position and what challenges she was facing in the organization. I got a very surprising insight. Suddenly, she stretched out in the chair and said, "Irma, remember, the higher you go, the lonelier you get." Here is the question. Have you ever had this feeling in your own work experience? Vidmantas, does it sound familiar to you? Can you share your own story?
I think that it resonates very well. And there is this saying that the CEO is the loneliest job in the world. I've heard it many times. And I agree with it that there is some loneliness the higher in the hierarchy you are. Just how naturally it forms some circles of people, circles of communication. And sometimes you're just excluded out of these circles, even without your own, purpose or target. I always thought that the more flat organization is, the faster the decisions are moving, the more agile organization is. So I don't believe in the large hierarchies, and always wanted even large organizations feel and do decisions like in a smaller organization. But still, even in the organization of a few hundred people, it's already the C-level executives. They are already a bit pushed out of the different circles of communication, and it's probably natural. You can change that with your own, lead by example. Be simple, be humble. Just don't show somehow. It's enough coming from the below, this force, that you are somehow different. I never felt different, but just people put you in this position that you are somehow different, and sometimes you shouldn't be involved in some conversations, which I think it's not fair talking about the CEOs or other C-level executives. but it is what it is. During the years, I'm now 14, 15 years working as a CEO in different companies. So I used to this loneliness, and I'm kind of okay with that, though I don't think that it's the right way how the world should go and how the management should be organized.
So let me lean into that conversation then. So should leadership be a lonely space? Meryl, you said earlier on, let's kick it to the curb. So how do we turn this around? How do we turn it around from a lonely space to, I don't know, an engaging space? How do we turn it into a space where there's a community of leaders? What do we do? What is it that we do to shift this thinking from, it's lonely at the top to, hey, you know what? There's lots of engagement at the top.
Yeah. It's a question for the ages, isn't it? So in my perspective, I think the startups actually will lead the way, because the startups don't have a hierarchy initially. Who's ever working on whatever is important that day and whichever strengths of their entrepreneurial nature need to come forward, and harnessing that. So I think that if you could sustain that kind of contribution mindset, that we can all contribute, and we all have strengths. I attended a great conference in New York called WorkX, which talks about the intersection of people development, but also the physical asset of the real estate, because there's such a challenge in the major cities since COVID of empty real estate. What are we going to do with it? How do we need to redesign the physical space to support the talent of the future? So I think the idea is thinking about the talent of the future. So CEOs come and go, my country especially, they're always going and always getting big cash outs. But who really remains is, if we don't cultivate that ability and tear the paper ceiling, which says, I have a certificate from Harvard Business School or such and such, and this qualifies me to lead people, instead of, I have this, a set of values that will sustain us going forward. I love, Irma, that you said that Vidmantas is the most resilient person you've ever encountered. And I think in today's world, I follow this particular futurist who's coined a term called Bhana, that is a societal condition as a result of unrelenting change: brittle, anxious, non-linearity, no cause and effect that you can point to anymore, and then incomprehensible overwhelm. So if that's true, everyone's experiencing it, including the CEO. So if the CEO can, as Vidmantas says, model it and show that resilience is the quality that will help us going forward, not this rarefied atmosphere around power, but that contribution as opposed to power is what's going to take us to the next level. And being able to democratize contribution in some way, like teams and startups do.
Wow. So Meryl, just building onto that, what I'm hearing you say is that it's not about being the all-powerful, all-knowing, let's call it Yoda. Excuse my way of framing that. But in the words of,
I think Yoda would be a good leader.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely, you would. Yeah. But just thinking about a lot of the writings and some of the stuff I've read from Brene Brown about just going into a space and literally being, what's the word she uses? Vulnerability. Yeah. So what I'm hearing here is that in order to turn this thing around and not be so lonely at the top, you've got to be vulnerable. Yeah. And that's literally going to come across, because that's what you model, right? You get what you model. If you model strength and everything's going to be perfect, and I'm Yoda, I have all the answers, well, that's what you're going to create. But if you model vulnerability, we have a very, very different organization. But I'd just like to hear your views of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with Meryl that startups are the ones that are paving this way and moving the needle in the different model of work, of everyday's work and organization. And when the company quickly, starting from a startup, from 10 people, quickly grows to 500, 1,000 people, sometimes in these few years of growth, they still, usually, they still remain very agile and very direct communicating. And what I totally believe in myself, in the ownership, so they still own their topic, their field of responsibility. And when you own it, you are the leader at that space. Even in our small and early stage startup, there are owners of some topics when I'm not the leader there. I'm just part of the team. And this shifting position, your position in any project, that already makes more flexible roles in the organization. So who is the, how to say, CEO of this project? So there should be, there can be anyone who is taking the responsibility and who is leading it. And then the CEO of the company can be just a member, the team member at that project, which is like super normal in a startup. And then this mindset, if it evolves with the company when it's growing, so I think it still stays the same. Just CEO of the company has sometimes the jobs to do, which may, impact the whole organization. For example, fundraising or financing. So you just it's just bigger responsibility. Otherwise, it's just a project. It's just a job to do. So I agree that the ownership and the startup mindset, it's already making its way in the various organizations. People move and they bring with themselves this way of thinking, even into corporate world.
Thank you, Vidmantas, Meryl. I want a little bit to shift to, because you already tapped a little bit of topic on resilience, and I'm listening to you, Meryl and Vidmantas, and starting thinking we are talking about resilience, but maybe that's really a topic of of huge corporate who still have this old management systems. And do we talk about resilience in the startup world? If we are, if we take responsibility, if we take accountability, if we have, good level of empathy, if we do understand the teamwork, how resilience really, does it have any impact? Or should we talk about then, that personal resilience is a topic, here we don't talk anymore about corporate resilience. What's your thought here?
I can start a bit from the startup perspective. I think that you have to be very resilient in a startup because of the total unpredictability. Total unpredictability of your product or service. You are looking for the market fit. For example, if you're early stage, or the growth factor, or the economy, and so on. And from the personal perspective, you're not so sure how your organization will survive, the next couple of years. So you have to be super adaptive. And that's probably that it means resilience, adaptivity, that, like Darwin said, so, not the strongest remain. But so I think in a startup world, the resilience is the core. And it's probably the prerequisite that you have to be curious, resilient, and not afraid of the moments of uncertainty. About the corporate world, it's another type of resilience, but I think it's much more well organized. The systems are in place, the processes are in place. You get your box of responsibilities, and lots of things are written there. What you have to do at what time and how. So So I think you can be a bit more relaxed in the corporate world, but probably other factors kick in. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Meryl can comment on that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Vidmantas. Meryl, what's your thought here?
So, you know, it's my office manager. So I'm kind of interested in this because, you know, we're sort of hovering around the idea that the startup by nature, people have to be kind of resilient. So actually we're sort of grooming people to be agile in a startup situation. But the nice thing is that they have this, they're not alone in what they're doing. They're really so enmeshed in a team effort. And I think that is the insulating factor in such a powerful way. So if we thought about it, and that is the trend anyway, is more and more teaming. We can't do things alone. Things are too complex. We can't find solutions. One silo cannot find a solution. It has to be cross-functional, even in a very small organization. So I think that if we started encouraging that at the startup level, I think resilience is the outcome of being agile and knowing that, oh my goodness, look, we got through this and we can get through this. It's what the stamina to get through it. So then we have to turn to the fitness specialist here. Like, how do we create the stamina for change? So many people will say, you know, I hate change. It's very hard to, you know, live in the world and say you hate change. That means you're not going to develop, you're on the way out right, very quickly, because everything you face is change. It's not going to be what it is tomorrow. I think in the corporate world, there's a tremendous amount of suffering, politics, whatever. So people sometimes think, as Vidmantas says, you know, when you go into the corporate world, it's more contained, there's less chaos. There's also less of an opportunity for self-expression, less of an opportunity for autonomy. So you're weighing in with these factors all the time. So I'm thinking that maybe we shouldn't actually look at the startups today, unless we look at the ones that are being started by the 16-year-olds, like one of the ones I'm involved in right now is like Robots Africa, you know, started by a 16-year-old. And the younger people, they always want to do things together. And that's a really good thing. So somehow we have to infuse the idea of, and it's difficult in a country for this Greco-Roman idea, like we're developing individual heroes, as opposed to a more Confucian style where, you know, we do everything as part of a collective. So how can we blend the East and West might be a way. We've been trying to do that for forever, but I don't think we have succeeded. So, but the startups sort of, you know, they have the way in. They may not be discussing it, they're living it. Can they go back and actually collect the insight and the learning, and then somehow carry that forward to create a learning organization that matures and is no longer start up, but retains some of that and embeds it in the cell. I mean, that's the Darwin approach, right? Like if you do this enough, you will pass it on to the next generation. It'll become in the bone, in the DNA. I don't know if that made sense. I got too excited about my own idea.
It does. So let me just maybe build on to what you're saying, Meryl. And I made a few notes here, hopefully between what you and Vidmantas said, and I'm hearing some themes here, right? So the one theme I'm hearing is that, you know, there's this big difference between the corporate world and the startup world. And I'm just gonna, maybe it's wrong to bucket, but I'm gonna bucket in any case. So in the startup world, literally, the ethos of the startup world is is agility, having to always think out of the box, because your sheer existence or your existence from day to day depends on your ability to maneuver and to literally move this organization forward. Yeah, you literally, you know, it's just in African terms, if you're not hunting, you're not eating. Yeah, and simply put that way. If you don't go out and hunt that day, there's no food on the table, you're going to starve. And that's literally what makes leadership in startup a little bit more, let's call it resilient, is the fact that, the mindset is always a case of, hey guys, my livelihood and my success is not guaranteed. Yeah. My ability to sustain myself is not guaranteed beyond the next 24, 48 hours, whatever short time span I'm working in. Versus if one then flips it over to a corporate world, there's a little bit more comfort there. There's established norms, there's some level of security there. And maybe, so what I'm hearing from both of you is that one of the things that could address this loneliness at the top is perhaps a little theory that says, well, why does the top, and I'm hearing, at the end of the day, it's about encouraging teaming. Yeah. So in order for you to address the loneliness at the top, the learning from the startup thinking or the startup way of being is literally this thing we called encouraging teaming. Yeah. So how will leaders within a corporate space that leads large organizations encouraging teaming? What would encouraging teaming mean for somebody like that? Love to hear your views on that. Thank you. Vidmantas, do you want to perhaps lead into that, or Meryl?
I can also comment a bit on the Meryl's thought. I just love the idea, like resilience can be changed into the team shift of the responsibilities and ideas. Because yeah, really, I think you just shouldn't be, the strongest person, who never breaks. No, you just have to get great teammates who will help you go through any situation, just like in some kind of Navy SEALs, for example. Yeah, it's the team effort who will make the miracle, not if you will be the one Superman and then saving the world. So I love this idea, and then this, and I agree that then this teaming can also be by leaders. It can be pushed forward also by your own example, how you build the team, how you encourage communication within the team, how you share responsibilities in the team, how you share the leadership responsibilities in the team. Then don't always be the one who speak first and then ends last, or who will also always taking, yeah, I will do this. No, just anyone can do this who feels like it, who has the best knowledge, who has the motivation. So I think it should be done both through the work, what's done, but also through the time that you spend together as a team, that you have some off time together. So both through the projects that you're doing, and also through the leisure that you are spending together, and some off time of work.
Yeah. Oh, would I like to be in that organization?
Tell me more, Meryl. You'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So I think what I'm hearing from that, Vidmantas, is like, then you have a shared vision, and it includes having a decent life. You're not just one-sided, and you're not just producing for, it's not just a results-oriented world, always producing results. It's about producing a greater life for all concerned. And if we do that inside, then more likely we're going to do it outside with whatever we contribute, and whether it's a product, it's service, it's an NGO, it's a government agency, it's a private entity. Sanjay, you asked the question, like, how can you do this in large corporate? I think that we use a term called leadership teams, but they aren't really teams at all. They are, the heads of verticals, and, in the organization, and they stopped working as a team when they're that positioned. But I have seen some shift in that, and it's about this idea to surrender the idea of command and control as the desired way to lead. You can't do command and control when you're actually a team. There's only one leader. So then you have to lead. It's a shared leadership, which has to have shared values, really, not the values that they post on the inspirational posters in the halls of large corporate, but actually lived and breathed, where the supposed leaders of the hall are living in the hallway and talking to people all the time and finding out how they're doing and taking the temperature of the organization. And when leaders do that, then they bring it back to the leadership team and they say, so if we're going to succeed, in the long run, our people aren't happy, they're frightened and whatever. What can we do about that? So I think that instead of just constantly trying to be the expert in the field, the catalyst for a desired future state where there is equal contribution, a voice to be heard. Years ago, I'm pretty sure it was one of the technology firms, and I'm not sure which one it was. It was kind of not like the high tech that we have today, that's with robotics and AI, but more in the manufacturing sense of, products that are being sold. There was a subculture in the organization, and they had their own closed area network where they did a lot of what we would call graffiti and talked about all the things they didn't like in the organization. And instead of punishing those people and trying to shut it down, the powers that be made it required reading, that all the leaders should go watch that and read that. So anyway, of course, what happened is the graffiti artists took it offline because they didn't want all the leaders looking at it. As you said, the closed conversation. We need to express this without fear that we're going to be of retribution. So, that's what's going to have to happen, is leaders have to be able to hear the negative feedback, invite it and not punish it, and actually reward it. To know what's stirring the pot, because later on that could actually create an obstacle for the resilient behavior that will be needed, because it will be needed. So.
Thank you, Meryl Vidmantas. I also started thinking when you started talking about teaming and continuing this topic, I do see and do read a lot about, how corporates trying to get back employees to their offices, and they are failing. But a part of that, there's the statistic that 42% of employees have burnouts, which cost around 300 billion euros. So everybody's suffering, and the leader or the manager or team leader suffers that he can't really get those people back. And what I hear that there are so many people who they don't want to do anything, together. As you, Vidmantas, was saying, you spend some time with team, you do some interesting things together. What would be the recipe for, getting those people back and, to have this pure teaming as we used to have till COVID?
Just yesterday I've been visiting the large organization, and they said, they just built out the new office, and we were going through these floors, showing around the office, and it was pretty empty. And they said, yeah, we have this, we are struggling, to bring people back. Super new place, everything arranged there, and people are not coming back. I think you have to start, on the personal level, and you have to build this relationship. It's not just, you throw in some fruits in the office day and then everybody will come back. No. There should be some love there, and they have to feel it. And if they don't feel it, not the nicest and shiniest things in the office would help. So you have to take one step down or one step back, and then say, did we build this relationship? And if we didn't have time, so how should we start? If there is a new person joining our team tomorrow, how we will show that we care? How we will show that we are somehow connected? We are a part of something bigger, that you and me, we belong together. And whoever am I, whichever position I am or in an organization, if I'm a CEO and you are some whatever level employee, so why we are here together, and why do we come to this work together? What can we create together more as opposed to being separated? And if you have clear vision of that yourself, so then it's easier to communicate. Otherwise, you have to think about it together with the team and think about this why.
Thank you, Vidmantas. Meryl, what's your thoughts?
So I agree with this so much, what Vidmantas is saying. And I was thinking, I heard a talk from someone from the Office of the Future at Hewlett-Packard last week or the week before, and talking about the fact that the engagement proposition has to change. The engagement proposition has to change. It's no longer you get a good salary, these are your benefits, et cetera, et cetera. People risked their lives to go to work during COVID, and people died. And there's been a huge shift in values. And there's a big values study that was conducted in 2020 initially by the Barrett, they're out of the Netherlands. It's a superb study that shifted all the priorities of people in the workplace. And whereas before achievement, accomplishment, moving ahead, expressing your talents were high on the food chain in terms of what people valued, that completely shifted, where it became family, safety, health, well-being were the top four. A complete reversal, and it's been sustained for the last few years. So people have to want to come back, and the spaces that have been created, and it's true in New York too. I look at all these office spaces that are 30% occupancy. Why do people want to be together, but they want to be together on their own terms. And that's what I thought was so interesting from the Office of the Future at HP. I have to think differently. Why shouldn't people, rather than company leadership, define what that space needs to look like and feel like? What if we asked people, what is the way you want to work going forward? Not just, is it hybrid? Is it remote? Is it in person? But what matters to you? We haven't really done that. We've been guessing. We've been doing some surveys, but it's not a constant practice. And a large study, I'm a research geek, a large study, well, there are a massive number of studies that have been done from the positive psychologists around the world that said that there are 3 things that leaders were going to need to do to support people in the future: buffering, bolstering, and building. That's what they're going to have to do. Buffering, so that people don't have to constantly be barraged by this terrifying stuff. Bolstering, encouragement, giving people different kinds of, it's not just benefits, but considerations. And then building, constantly trying to build people, give them a chance to meet them where they are. And that is, those were very powerful things for me to read.
Thank you, Meryl. Vidmantas.
Thank you, colleagues. We've had a lovely 40-minute conversation, and I want to conclude it with perhaps 2 lines. But before I do that, I want to say thank you to both Meryl to Vidmantas and to Irma for this first conversation. I mean, this has been really, really interesting. I've made a stack full of notes. Well, unfortunately, you can't see that because of the background, but I'm going to just maybe read 3 things out that stood out for me today. The first one is, it doesn't have to be a lonely at the top. You need to become the catalyst for the desired future state. I think that for me is a very, very powerful statement there. The second thing is just going back to that, in that, unpredictability is something that you need to become comfortable to deal with. It's the way you need to live. Yeah. We're living in a Bhana world, and living with unpredictability is the new norm. Now, the question is, how do people go out and develop those abilities to live with unpredictability? And perhaps that's a conversation for our next conversation. But that's the second set of notes. And the third, I just want to end with those 3 little comments that Meryl has just said now. Sorry, I'm going through all of my notes and trying to find all my scribbles. But these 3 things that you just said, buffering, bolstering, and building, and literally it boils down to answering that question that Meryl, you just raised. It's just asking people, what is the way you want to work? What matters to you? And I think that's probably the most important of all of these conversations, is what matters to each of us. So with that, I'd like to say thank you to everybody. This is conversation 1 of Evolutionary Conversations. Looking forward to our next conversation in April 2023. We look forward to hosting some very interesting guests like we've had today. And we look forward to you guys engaging further and building on to what we've done today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for our guests. Thank you, Sanjay. Bye.
Thanks
everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.